Hey guys, it is me, the Emerald Sword, and welcome back to another video where today I'm going to be reviewing another book. But this book that we have today is called The Eyes of the Dragon by Stephen King. And so the interesting thing about The Eyes of the Dragon is that it's actually like a hardcore fantasy novel by Stephen King, which he doesn't do very much because, horror or sci-fi or whatever. He doesn't do fantasy a lot. And Eyes of the Dragon is his first fantasy book, but it's the second one that I've read by him because I read Fairy Tale last year, and because I didn't do reviews back then, I didn't review it. So I am incredibly sorry for that, and I will review that if I ever reread it. So anyway, The Eyes of the Dragon, it's set in an indeterminate time because the only word, which is at the beginning of the novel, says once, and it's set in a kingdom called Delain, which is kind of your average kingdom. King is about to die, two sons, the oldest of which is about to become king, stuff like that. So basically, the king, his name is King Roland, and he wasn't like a super remarkable king or anything, but back in his heyday when he still did fighting and stuff, he shot a dragon through the heart with an arrow and then killed it. And so, like all of his other game, I guess, that he hunted and killed, he had the head placed in his room right across from his bed. So that is really freaky. Anyway, so that's like really the main part about the dragon, but we'll get to where it's actually important later. Yeah, there's not a lot of dragon in this, but you'll see later. Anyway, so then, as I said, he has two sons. The oldest, which is Peter, who's going to become king, and the youngest, Thomas, who's just living life. Thomas is just living life. So over the course of Peter's growing up, he makes friends. He saved a horse from being killed and all that stuff. He's like a really good prince. And then Thomas, being the younger one, he was a little more rebellious. He's not like evil or anything. He's just rebellious. But in Delain, there's also this magician called Flag, and he really wants to take down the kingdom for whatever evil reason he has. So this is where stuff gets interesting. He takes young Thomas, and he's like, hey, there's like a secret compartment in like your dad's room's wall. And so he takes him through the wall, and then there's like slides of like metal or whatever, and then it leads into like this weird like looky through thing, kind of like this, but those looky things are the eyes of the dragon. Yeah, isn't that cool? You could just look at stuff through the eyes of the dragon. That's how the dragon's actually important, by the way. So anyway, so Thomas is just like, cool. And so he spies on his dad for a while. But remember, Flag wants to destroy the kingdom. So what he does is he makes a little potion made with dragon sand, which if contacted on anything that's like skin related, you'll just flare up and burn and die, and it's horrific. So one night, while Thomas is spying on his father through the eyes of the dragon, Flag comes in to deliver the king a potion which Thomas knows has been poisoned with the dragon sand. And it was like, no! And then, yeah, that's it. So then a couple days later, Roland just like falls to the floor, starts to flare up on the inside, and then he just dies from being burned up on the inside. I know it's so horrific, but oh my gosh. And so Peter's like, this is terrible. And then Thomas is like, this is terrible. And Flag's like, yes. Because he's evil. But here's where stuff really starts getting interesting. Flag actually doesn't want people to know that he murdered the king, because of course not. So he goes to Peter's room, who knows what he's doing, because Peter's like ready to be king and stuff, and he puts like a rat that had the same dragon sand thing happen to it in like this hidden compartment in the bookshelf. And then he just leaves it there. So then Peter's butler in training, Dennis, he goes to check out the bookshelf and then finds the smoldering dead rat in there. So then he tells his father, and then word gets out of the kingdom, and then Peter's put on trial, and he's found guilty, and then he's sentenced to live the rest of his life in this imprisonment called the Needle, which I guess is like a really tall tower. So yeah, that's where Peter is for the most of the book. And so, of course, because Peter can't fulfill his kingdom duties because he's locked in prison, Thomas takes over, and he's like, oh, this was a bad idea. It's like, I will give credit to him. He's 11 years old. At 11 years old, I would want to rule a kingdom. But he's like, no, I'm not responsible enough. That's Peter's job. So Flag is like, oh, okay. So you're going to be king, but since you don't know what you're doing, I'm going to help you, right? I'm going to help you. And Thomas is like, yeah, that's fine. So basically, Thomas rules the kingdom for about 4 or 5 years with the help of Flag, who's really calling the shots and helping to destroy the kingdom. And that's really bad. So while Peter is locked in this prison, he's like, stuff is getting bad. I need to escape. So what he does is he asks for his mother's dollhouse, which has like actual working stuff in there because there's a loom. And he asks for napkins because his mother always wanted him to use napkins. So what he does is he like takes out the threads of the napkins and then looms them together for like 4 or 5 years, just waiting to get a thread long enough to escape the tower. So then while he's doing that, of course, like Flag is, of course, working to do all this stuff. But Peter has a friend named Ben. That's my name, so that's pretty cool. And of course, his butler in training, Dennis, they'll start to realize, man, I don't think Peter, kind of killed the king. So what they do is that all this stuff, Peter writes a note to this guy, Panis, I think. And no, I did not say that other word. I said penis. Pena, that's it. Pena. But yeah, so he writes the letter to Pena, and then Pena's like, oh, I made a mistake. So then they all like hatch this escape plan to get Peter out of there. So meanwhile, Peter is still trying to get out, and he's climbing down. But because Flag is like right there trying to kill him, he drops and then lands on like a bunch of towels or napkins or whatever. So he's saved, and now he's out. So then the rest of the book from here is just them trying to fight Flag. So then what happens is that they get cornered in the king's bedroom, Roland's bedroom, and then Flag's like, haha, I'm gonna kill you, but just so you know, I did murder your father because I'm evil and stuff. And Thomas is like, yeah, not so fast. So what he does is he grabs the arrow that killed the dragon, that Roland used to kill the dragon. He fires it at Flag, and then Flag just kind of disappears. And that's kind of the end for Flag. But here's what really sets apart Eyes of the Dragon from other Stephen King books. The ending isn't terrible. I know, that's weird to hear. Stephen King is known for terrible endings, but The Eyes of the Dragon actually does not end terribly. So what happens is that after they kill Flag, basically Thomas testifies everything that Flag did and stuff. Peter is released from prison officially this time, and then he goes as king, and then Thomas and Dennis set out to go find Flag or whatever. I think Flag is truly dead, but they're going to find Flag, and then they vow to not come back until they do. And yeah, that's kind of the ending. It does leave room open for a sequel, but since the book was originally released in 1984, and then it had a limited release in 84, and then it had a permanent release in 87, which is what this is. This is 87 onward. But yeah, 84 is 40 years ago, so I don't think it's going to get a sequel, guys. I just don't. Anyway, so as I mentioned in my Every Books I've Read in 2023 video that I did last year, I mentioned that I'm not really into fantasy anymore. Fantasy kind of bores me now, so that's why Fairy Tail was really hard to get through at times. But I really enjoyed Eyes of the Dragon. Like, it's one of the best fantasy books I think I've read since I was into Harry Potter and Percy Jackson. Like, it's really good. The ending is really solid, and it's also quite short. I know that doesn't look quite short, but the audiobook I used was about 10 hours. So it's really short. It's easy to get into, and it's actually quite family friendly. There are a couple language words. It's like they use the word for going to the bathroom, the number one, not number two. Child language. Oh my gosh. But anyway, so yeah, they say that, and then they say the more slightly more extreme versions of dang and gosh dang. So if you know what those are, then there you go. But there's no F words, which I found really surprising given what Stephen King writes. But yeah, I mean, those are my thoughts on The Eyes of the Dragon. I would recommend it to both fantasy and non-fantasy readers. As I said, it's basically family friendly considering it's Stephen King. It's quite short. It's really easy to get into, and even though it's connected to the Dark Tower, since it probably takes place beforehand, it's not really connected to anything else. But yeah, those are my thoughts on The Eyes of the Dragon. If you like this video, make sure to leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, subscribe down below if you have not. Anyway, I've been Ben from the Emerald Sword, and I will see you guys next time.